Now it's time for Perspective on the programme today. And on the programme today, I'm delighted to tell you we have an award winner, an award-winning photographer, in fact. Hugh Kinsella Cunningham has just been awarded the Gold Humanitarian Award from the International Committee of the Red Cross at the Visa pour l'Image Festival. That's the International Photojournalist Festival held at the moment, right now, and every year in Perpignan in southwest France. His work, which is now on display in the city, focusing on the plight of civilian victims of the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And he's with us here on set now. Thanks very much for coming in. Congratulations, first of all, on the award. Some of the photos are very difficult. Let's have a look at one of them. This is the aftermath of a strike that you filmed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Tell us about the picture.
So what I've been using a lot is drones in my photography, because I feel it adds a bit of an element of forensic science. We're not just looking at artistic photos, you're looking at photos of a crime scene. So what's happening in Congo is the city of Goma has been surrounded by M23 rebels and the Rwandan army, while the Congolese army are trapped below alongside civilian displacement camps, and exchanges of artillery fire have been going on. So perhaps people might not be aware, conflict in Africa, it's some of the same tools of modern war we're seeing in Ukraine, the use of attack drones, night vision, first-person drones, and very heavy artillery fire is being used in these conflicts too. So this photograph shows a missile crater from a 122mm Grad rocket that hit a displacement camp. Many of the victims were children, because displacement camps, civilians, the mothers and fathers are often out all day searching for water, searching for supplies, so children are often left to their own devices. So this shows, just the devastation when using, high caliber weapons that were fired from M23 positions into a civilian zone. And this strike was a real kind of like wake-up call that this situation can't be allowed to continue any longer. I spoke to a mother who lost one of her children in the strike. She was away from the camp. She was walking back to the site as she actually saw the rocket hit, and she came back and she found her children covered in blood, one of whom sadly passed away. And this isn't the first strike I photographed. I remember in February I was in a town called Sake when that was the front line. And I remember being present when 2 children had been struck by an M23 mortar, and their mother has been killed as well. And that's a family wiped from the earth. It's really worth the world's attention, I think.
We're going to look at some of the other pictures in a moment, which shows some of the people fleeing the violence there. There are some happier moments that you managed to snap as well, if that's the right word. This is a wedding that you took pictures of. Tell us about it.
So again, in my photography, there are some moments that are hard to look at, but are essential. We must be informed about the plight of civilians. So I try and balance it out with giving you a perspective of the community and daily life themselves. I'm very aware. I've had the privilege to be in Congo for several years now. I've been accepted to work there. I have the privilege of being a foreigner, and I want to do justice to some of the resilience and the joy I encounter. So this photograph I took a couple of years ago, and you wouldn't believe it, but this town was historically one of the sites of Congo's worst massacres. Nearly 2 decades ago now, FDLR rebels, some of the perpetrators of the Rwandan genocide next door, fled into Congo. They were attacking civilians there. So this town, Kanyola, 500 civilians were killed there. Mass graves, survivors were being tortured in the forest. But to come back 2 decades on and just stumble across a wedding party full of joy, full of life, music coming down these mud tracks was incredible. So I do want to share these moments as well, to show that there is a bit of hope for life after conflict, but also maybe talk a little bit more about the history of conflict in Congo. Every province is seeing conflict in the east at the moment. There are multiple ongoing wars, 7 million displaced civilians. Some families have run from war 1, 2, or even 3 times from conflict in their lives. Mothers can remember, being walked down these roads hand in hand with their mothers, as they're being displaced with their children now. It's, a generational conflict.
We're going to look at some of the other pictures as we continue talking, but tell us what you're aiming for when you take a picture. What is it that you're after, if you like, to make that picture so special?
Well, first of all, just, artistically, my photographs are very colourful, to try and bring your eye in, to make you wonder about what's going on. But secondly, they are all a form of advocacy. To take these huge statistics that are almost impossible to comprehend. 7 million displaced, 1.5 million displaced in a single conflict, to try and give you a look at the families, to try and hear their stories. All of my photographs come with interviews, testimonies, to try to build a history of a conflict, to advocate for civilians who often are left completely on their own. I speak to civilians fleeing down these roads after the fighting, as they've had to run from their village at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. as explosions approach. Civilians feel they've been let down by the international community. There's a contingent of United Nations peacekeepers who seem to have done little to stop the advance of the M23 and the RDF. They've claimed that these groups are too well armed for the UN to go toe to toe with, and I've had civilians tell me, why are we not being protected? Do our lives not matter? After that strike we saw with the missile, civilians were angry. They protested. Every vehicle that wasn't an ambulance was blocked from entering that camp for a while because there was this sense of incredible frustration. We've been left in these camps to die.
What's taken you to Congo particularly? I mean, you're obviously a British photographer. What are you doing there, as it were?
So about 5-6 years ago, it was the anniversary of Muhammad Ali's Rumble in the Jungle. So I went to see it for myself, and I've got a bit waylaid on the way. I started taking photographic commissions in the East. And I've covered Ebola outbreaks, environmental stories there. But spending so long in the East has been, it's been a real privilege to get inside the story. This photo we can see here of rebel child soldiers being mobilized to fight the M23. That's in a town called Kichanga, which was one of the very first towns I was sent to on assignment in East Congo in 2019 to photograph the demobilization of child soldiers. Trying to make them carpenters, trying to make them taxi drivers, give people a profession and a chance at a future. So to come back 5 years later and to see child soldiers, once again rearmed out on the streets was, a very powerful thing. And it really, helps me by spending as much time as possible on the ground. I think that's the best way to get the whole story.
And what receptions do you get from people, whether they're rebels, whether they're people fleeing the conflict?
I found people are extremely warm and welcoming. So we might be seeing some of the more dramatic photos now where, we're watching people flee for their lives. Some of these photos, you're hearing the attack jets going overhead, you're seeing and watching the artillery being fired as people flee. But quite a lot of my work focuses on the softer moments. I always go back to displacement camps days, weeks, months afterwards to follow up with families, do interviews, find out how they're doing. And that's often when you really see just how difficult life for civilians is. The fact that displacement camps have become home for, it's not a temporary refuge. There are places in Congo where civilians are stuck in refugee camps for years of their life. So that's really crucial for me to spend as much time as possible speaking to people and channeling their voices. It's not about me, it's about the community.
So what are your hopes for the future then? I mean, continue taking more pictures to try and make a difference? Will it actually make a difference?
So I've been covering this resurgence of the M23 conflict since the very beginning, the very first displacement, when we saw attacks coming over the Rwandan border, and then that's now escalated over 2 years of this offensive to have the city of Goma surrounded. So in my head, we will see where it goes, this conflict. There's been numerous attempts at a ceasefire, none of which have worked. There's been multilateral military deployments. It's incredibly hard to track the conflict, to bring light to it, because it's so complex. You have multiple armies on the ground fighting each other, huge influx of private military contractors, military equipment. So it's a conflict we really do want to shed as much light on as possible.
Well, great to see the pictures, and thanks for bringing them in for us and showing them to us here on the programme. And best of luck for the future as well, taking more of those pictures as well. If you do want to see the exhibition itself, by the way, it's still on in Perpignan, if you happen to be there, at the Palais de Cour in Perpignan until the 15th. But also you can watch that again and have a look at the pictures again if you want to. It'll be online on our website a little bit later on. Thanks very much once again for coming in, Hugh Kinsella Cunningham.